If you want to get to know Hashem, the first thing you'll note in his Torah is that it's full of descriptions of him, including assigning him a right hand and a left hand, a face, eyes, nose, mouth, more. He's described as loving us, being angry at us, laughing, crying. How can this be? Surely it's heretical to believe that this is literally true. We all know from the 13 articles of Jewish faith, Hashem does not have a body or anything like a body, and it's forbidden to believe such. We know that he doesn't change and is beyond time. So how can he have emotions? Emotions are changes after all. 1 minute I'm sad, then I'm happy, then I'm angry. How can this apply to Hashem? Let me ask a question that my great teachers have asked. If we're forbidden to conceive of any physical or material image when relating to Hashem, why does the Torah do so? We know that Hashem obeys his own rules, as it were. He observes the Torah's commandments. Why not this one? So you may have already heard and answered this question. In Yesodei HaTorah, in the first halachic codex written by the Rambam, he writes that the Torah is written in the language of men, the language of humans. People explain this to me as follows. Hashem doesn't really have a hand. It's forbidden to think such a thing. But we humans aren't able to think about things outside our realm of experience and our paradigm. Therefore, the Torah uses the language of man, meaning it describes Hashem in ways that we can understand, even though they're not actually like this. For example, they will say, Hashem doesn't really get angry. Instead, what's really happening when the Torah says that he's angry is that he's performing actions that correspond to human anger. When a human is angry, he raises his voice, he speaks harshly, he issues punishments. When the Torah says Hashem is angry, indeed, he speaks harshly and issues punishments. But we must know, they say, that it's not coming from an emotion like humans. This understanding of the words of the Rambam is problematic for two major reasons. The first is that it makes a joke of the Torah. We know that the Torah is true. So how can it be speaking in terms which are not true? The Torah is not just true in the superficial sense, but true in the deepest sense imaginable. And every nuance must be true on every level. It is Hashem himself speaking after all. So even the outermost layers must be absolutely accurate and true. Saying that the Torah uses analogies doesn't help us either. Firstly, an analogy is just a parable, a story, not a reality. So it's not fundamentally true in and of itself. Secondly, even if we do say that it is an analogy, these analogies are very suspicious, aren't they? They're attributing physical attributes to Hashem. How can the Torah do this? That's the second issue. And finally, a question. Analogies are supposed to help us understand. But the question is, what are these analogies helping us understand? If Hashem doesn't have a hand, then what is telling me he's got one as some sort of metaphor? Help me. How does it help me in any way? If anything, it's confusing me. Every mashal has to have a nimshal. But you're saying there's no nimshal? Then it's not a mashal. So my teachers said, no, this cannot be what the Rambam means. If the Torah says that Hashem has a hand, then he has a hand, in the most true and intrinsic sense possible. So what's the Rambam saying? The Rambam is saying that our hand is the mashal. Hashem has the real hand, and the human hand is just an analogy of it. His hand is the nimshal. Hashem indeed has a hand, but that hand transcends human understanding. We cannot conceive of an infinite, perfect, non-physical hand, or how it doesn't contradict Hashem's oneness, or lack of body, or him not changing. So Hashem gives us our own hand to help us a little bit understand his hand. So paradoxically, they are nothing alike, not even in the slightest, but at the same time, ours is a mashal. We can indeed relate to Hashem's hand now on our own level, as every good mashal does. A mashal may look nothing like what it's analogizing, but everything about the analogy makes it into the mashal, especially if it's a good mashal. So even though it doesn't look the same, the truth makes it in. Indeed, we learn in Ma'amar V'Yadata, Hashem's mashals are absolutely perfect. So the conclusion, the Torah talks of reality, the highest reality. The Torah describes things as they actually are, but it uses human language. It uses language that refers to things in our world, things that we are familiar with, so that we can begin to relate to those things, maybe the incorrect word, but that which is above our world. Those things that are real in the highest sense. My great teachers, of course, are not teaching us this extremely profound, recondite idea from their own imagination. They're basing it on our tradition, going right back to at least the Rambam himself. This idea is well established in all schools of thought, from Chakira to Kabbalah to Musa and even Hasidut. I will bring an example from each, starting with the Rambam's seminal work of Chakira, the Moreh Nevuchim. In the first 50 or so chapters of the Rambam's work, the Rambam gives example after example after example of how to apply this idea. The Torah says that Hashem sits. The Rambam has a chapter on what it means for Hashem to sit, and gives you a rough idea of how to elevate your understanding beyond the physical to something higher. All the while reminding you that no matter how high you get, you're never going to truly understand Hashem. 1 billion is no closer to infinity than 10, for example. Next, here's a quote from a Kabbalist and a Rishon, Rabbi Yosef Gikatila, in his work Yoreh, written in the 13th century. Here's the direct quote. So, what is the meaning of all these concepts we learn about in the Torah regarding Hashem's hand, foot, ear, or eye? Know and believe that no created being is able to understand or conceive of this thing called hand, foot, or ear, even though they do teach and testify to Hashem's greatness and truth. Yes, we are made in His image and likeness, but don't get it into your head that the Torah means that it's an actual form of an eye or an actual form of a hand. Rather, these are concepts that are the deepest of the deepest of the deep truths about Hashem's existence, may He be blessed, that from which come the source and influence to all that exists, according to Hashem's decree, may He be blessed. However, the very existence of that hand is not what this hand is. Their form is not alike. Like it is written, whom can you compare me to? To whom will I be equal? Yeshayahu chapter 40. End quote. Now, there is a famous Musa work called the Shalah, Shnei Luchot HaBrit, by Rabbi Yeshayahu Halevi Horowitz, composed in the 17th century, where he very clearly writes, quote, all the attributes mentioned with respect to Him, may He be blessed, such as eye, ear, leg, hand, and so forth, as well as the concepts of union, embrace, kiss, even father and mother, even son and daughter, even father-in-law and mother-in-law, and many such terms. All of these are holy language, the intrinsic names in holiness. Later, through the process of descent, they become borrowed terms to the point where even physical entities borrow these names and they're called thus. Thus it is understood that, on the contrary, all the limbs and parts of the chariot have their names in Him. May He be blessed, in essence. And He is the Adam Elyon, the supreme man. The names of our own limbs and powers are borrowed terms, and they are called thus because they are signs of what is above. Just as Reuben, son of Jacob, is a sign, as the author of the Bala Ora wrote, the Holy One, blessed be He, created the lower man with signs of the supreme man, so that he may serve as a chariot in the truth of his existence. There are exceedingly subtle spiritual inner matters that are parts of the chariot, from which the light and sustenance extend to maintain the existence of this world, which are made in His image, and they are called hands, legs, eyes, ears. However, the essence of a hand is not like the essence of a hand, nor is the form of a hand like the form of a hand, God forbid. As it is written, to whom will they liken God? Also, Yeshayahu chapter 40. There is no similarity whatsoever between Him and us, neither in essence nor in form. Nevertheless, He established and made it in this image to indicate that if one merits to purify his limbs and complete it with the mitzvot that depend on it, which is a Kabbalistic concept, by the way, I'm not going to get into it now, that limb will become like the chariot and the throne of glory for that higher inner matter that is called by that name, whether it be an eye, a hand, a leg, and so on with all the other limbs. End quote. Finally, and most clearly, the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Lubavitcher Rebbe, in his very chashuv Hasidic work, Derech Mitzvotecha, in the section called Ha'amanot Elokut, Faith in God, chapter 8, he goes through this problem in great detail and gives us a full, lengthy explanation. It is all translated into English, by the way, and look in the description for a link. And I can't quote it all here, but here is a direct quote. Quote, and the Torah's descriptions of Hashem may be truly explained in the simple meaning of what is written. End quote. I.e., Hashem does laugh. He does cry. And all other expressions can be understood in their simple meaning, so long as you're acknowledging that the truth of these matters is beyond your actual understanding. Your laughter is just a mushal for His. That's the key point. But the key point is that His is the real laughter, His tears are the real tears. They are so real and unified that you're not even allowed to, not to mention able to, even try to picture them in Jewish law, on pain of very serious punishment. So if you've had some theological pressure in the back of your mind not to read the Torah's simple meaning, assume that it's pretending, it's faking it, it's talking to you in a way that you can understand but doesn't really mean it, for fear of becoming heretical, you can now let go of that. This is important because it enables you to be able to comfortably relate to Hashem. Imagine a husband who thinks that every emotional action his wife shows him isn't actually real. She is putting it on, faking it, pretending. It doesn't matter why. Maybe she has a good reason. But you honestly can't conclude that this husband can have any sort of meaningful relationship with her, can you? Can he get to know her? Of course not. Suddenly this whole relationship becomes about him. When she cries, it's for his benefit, to train him to be more empathetic and practice his hugging and embracing skills. I don't know. She's not really sad. In fact, nothing he could do could truly make her so. When she's angry, it's not that he did something that actually bothers her, chas v'shalom. Rather, she wants him to know that it's not good for him to do that. So she shows him fake anger. She couldn't really care less about him or anything that he does after all. Everyone would admit that if the husband truly believed this is what's going on, he will never deeply connect with his wife. He will not view her as a living, breathing, feeling human being. He will see her as a tool for his own growth. He won't be able to love her or feel anything towards her. He won't even think about her at all. And it's exactly the same as what happens in our relationship with Hashem. If we think that the Torah isn't being true when it talks about him. 70% of the Torah talks about him in this way. You're just going to delete all that? This is exactly what happens when we drill into people that Hashem doesn't truly feel or care for us. And he's just doing it for our benefit. Not only is this not true, as we've proven, but it's also damaging and preventing us from forming a real relationship with him. Unfortunately, the reality is that this mistaken belief is extremely widespread. It's very important, therefore, to not be scared of this topic. As fraught as it is with dangers and misunderstandings, the correct reaction is not to avoid it and tell a white lie about it. The truth must always come first, especially about holy matters, including our relationship with Hashem. We must be fearless in telling this truth, to allow people to relax and give them permission to know Hashem properly and form genuine, authentic relationships with him. Anyone who opposes this is making a big mistake. If they end up calling people heretics for this, they are also calling all the great rabbis quoted here heretics too. They are cooling the waters of Hashem's children's love for him, making it impossible, and instilling psychological fear in his precious children. This is an offense to Hashem of the highest order, frustrating his need to connect and have an intimate relationship with his holy nation, every last one of his firstborn children. So, if you've heard someone you deeply respect, a Talmid Chacham or even a Gadol, say that Hashem doesn't have a hand, and to say so is blasphemous, you now know what they meant. If you heard someone teach that Hashem does have a hand, you now know what they meant. Anybody who is learned in these topics would never accuse someone of heresy for saying this basic truth. The only area of concern is to ensure that we get it right. And don't let people think that Hashem has a physical hand like us, chas v'shalom, or even a spiritual hand, or anything we can conceive of, bearing in mind that nothing is in violation of his unity, his perfection, his lack of limitation, simplicity, and all the other theological points that are the articles of our faith that we have heard by now and should know. The ultimate takeaway is that Hashem is more real than us, and therefore his love for us is real and totally beyond our comprehension. Not because it doesn't truly exist, but because the truth of its real existence is infinite. His hurt when we sin against him is also infinite. So the takeaway is scary, but wonderful, because the most wonderful things in the world are always scary. Awesome. Imagine the same husband we were talking about before being told that when his wife is upset, the depth of her emotion is so far elevated beyond his, so much more profound and authentic, on another plane of existence, that he simply has no idea how to relate to it. This husband will be in a similar situation to the previous husband in one sense. He can't understand his wife. However, in this latter case, his relationship with her will now become real. Now he gets how important this relationship is, how important she is, and how responsible he is towards her in a very real way. His being there for her, his treating her right, and loving her of absolute necessity to her. And the reality of it is so intense. Now the relationship is real, and he will sincerely serve her, and they will get closer. Perhaps even he will start to learn from her and really get to understand her properly, as his own feelings and his own conscious experience becomes holier and loftier too. The takeaway from all this is that it is serious. Far more infinitely serious than we imagine. And it's not just because of how serious it is to us. It's serious because how serious it is to him, and that should move us. Just like we are moved to take our loved ones' issues seriously too. So much more, infinitely more so in the case of Hashem. So now that we have permission, let's go back and read the Torah again. Let's get to know him without any barriers or fears. Let's get close to him and realize what the goodness of life really is, and produce some real laughter in heaven, as getting to know him and getting close to him fulfills the very purpose of creation. Briotecha anachnu. Shkoyach.